Thank you, Patrick. So hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation on how to make social media and web data work for you. Before we get going, a couple of housekeeping things. Firstly, we will allow a bit of time at the end for a Q&A session, but if you do have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the WebEx chat facility, which my colleagues will be monitoring. Okay, so quick introduction to me. My name is Alex Ross. I work as the UK lead sales consultant in our London office, and I'm very passionate about Tableau. I have a blog called Tableau Junkie, which we'll look at later on. My background before joining Tableau, I worked with CRM systems. I've worked with data quality. So I have used traditional business intelligence and reporting tools and have a good appreciation for how Tableau is fundamentally different to other tools that are out there in the market. Today is really about showing you how you can leverage social media and web data and obtain actionable insights for your business. So for the agenda, we're first of all going to discuss the options that are available to you for obtaining social media and web-based data sources. We're going to learn how you can use Tableau to analyze your company's Facebook page data. We're also going to look at how you can use Tableau to find out how your community engages with your organization on Twitter. We're going to discover how your website content affects the web traffic that's being driven to your website. And the example I'm going to use here focuses on Google Analytics and Tumblr. Tumblr is the platform which I chose to build my blog on, so I'm able to get some meaningful data and combine that with Google Analytics. And then finally, we're going to look at some weather data to understand the impact that weather might have on your organization and where you might be able to source useful information about weather patterns and correlate that to other data that you might have within your business. And by the way, if anybody's listening here who isn't already using Tableau, you can download a free trial of Tableau from the tableau.com website, and you can use the links that are on my blog, Tableau Junkie, to try out all of the connectors that we're going to be looking at this afternoon. So the first topic we're going to look at is how you can get your hands on that social media or web-based data. The first option that you have is to export directly from the platform that you're working with. So this might be flat files, typically CSV or Excel formatted, but this is a manual process and it's difficult to refresh the data and keep it up to date. It also often requires you to transform or reshape that data before you can analyze it in a tool like Tableau. The second option you have is to export the data from a third-party application. So there are integrated social media listening platforms out there, such as Hootsuite or Radian6, for example, that collect data and aggregate it across multiple social media platforms and deliver that into a portal where they provide analytics on top of that data that they aggregate. You can get live data from third parties as well. So I'm thinking of data sources here like GNIP or DataSift, who actually provide live streams of data. Later on, we're going to have a quick look at an example that focuses on Twitter and how we can use the Twitter streaming API to also get live access to social media data. And finally, the fourth option you have is to code your own solution. So this is using an API and or Tableau's web data connector, which is going to be a large part of the presentation this afternoon, to integrate Tableau with that application or with that platform and provide a direct link between Tableau and the data that you're trying to leverage. The great thing about the web data connector is they're very easy to share. So once someone has built a connector, such as the ones that we're going to be looking at today, you can actually leverage those. You can connect using those web data connectors that are out there in the community already. The first example we'll look at is how to collect and analyze data about your company's Facebook page. And these are the types of questions that you might ask of your Facebook data. Firstly, when is the best time to post our content to make sure that the highest number of people are viewing that content? What type of content are people finding the most engaging? How active are our social media marketing team on Facebook? So a couple of examples here of some questions that you might have of the data that's on your company's Facebook page. So the one option you have to obtain this data is to log into the facebook.com website and manually export it from there. And you can download that as an Excel file, for example. But as I said earlier, this might mean that you have to go through this manual process every time you want to update the data. And you might also have to reshape it before it's ready for analysis in Tableau. And this is really where you might choose to use the web data connector that I created for Facebook instead. So for those of you who are not using the web data connector already, this is a piece of functionality which was released in Tableau version 9.1. And the way you access it is when you open up Tableau Desktop, when you connect to a server, the option you choose is the web data connector. And you simply type in the URL of the web data connector that you're looking to connect to. So in this case, it's the Facebook one. Let's go ahead and look at a demo of how this works in practice. So what I'll do first of all is just show you very quickly the Facebook page which we're going to be obtaining data from. And for this example, I'm going to be using the Tableau Software company Facebook page. So if you go to the Tableau Software Facebook page, you'll see all of the posts and the likes and the shares of the content that's being posted on Tableau's Facebook page. But I want to analyze that data in Tableau. So let me open up Tableau Desktop and do exactly that. So the first thing I do is I click on the web data connector and I type in the URL of my Facebook web data connector for Tableau. Again, the link for this web data connector is available on my blog. So feel free to grab the link from there and copy and paste it into your own version of Tableau Desktop. Once you've done that, you'll need to log into your Facebook account. And once logged into your Facebook account, the connector figures out which Facebook pages you have been given access to. So in order to download the data for a Facebook page into Tableau, you'll need to make sure that the administrator of that Facebook page has given you access. And what that actually means is that they need to have assigned you a page role in Facebook, which means that you're an analyst or an editor, or you have a role that gives you access to that data. So I can tick here to download the data from the Tableau Software Facebook page and click the button to get that data into Tableau Desktop. Now that process takes normally about 2 minutes or so. So rather than waiting for 2 minutes, I've preloaded that data into Tableau Desktop so we don't have to wait around for it. And once it's loaded, we can then start asking questions about that data, such as how active is our marketing team on Facebook? So I'm going to drag out the number of records. And Tableau is showing me that we have 2,700 records in this data set. So that means that we have posted in total 2,700 times on our company's Facebook page. And I want to look at what that looks like over time. So I want to get an understanding as to whether there's an upwards trend in the number of posts that we're placing on our company's Facebook page. And yes, I can clearly see that it looks like the first thing that was posted was back in 2005. And there's been a very steady increase year on year on the posts that have been taking place. But I might want to get a bit more detailed than that. So let's also drill into this and maybe look at it on a monthly basis as a bar chart, let's say. In fact, let's do this. Let's do it by year and by month. So by year and by month. And I'm going to also compare the year-over-year number of posts for any particular month. So I'm interested in understanding whether our marketing team in October 2015 posted more in October 2015 compared with October 2014. So I'm also going to take the number of posts onto color and tell Tableau that this is going to be a table calc to compare the year-over-year growth. And anywhere where we've had a dip in the year-over-year growth, I'm going to make sure that that shows up in red. So now we're getting a bit more insight into the pattern by which our marketing team are posting. And we can see, although there's a very strong upwards trend year on year, there were some months which are showing up red now, where if we compare the number of posts in that particular month that year with the previous year, we're actually posting a bit less. So the next question I might have of my Facebook data is, what content are people finding the most engaging? And some of the measures that come back from my Facebook web data connector are information about the number of times a post has been liked and the number of times the post has been shared. So let's have a look at those measures. And we're first of all going to look at the number of likes. So I want to know the average number of likes for every post. So we can see across the data, we're getting on average 19 likes per post. But I want to look at this at a post level. So I want to know which specific posts have been liked the most. So let's go ahead and put the post ID onto detail. And let's have a look at this over time as well, perhaps on a monthly basis. I'm also interested in understanding what type of content people are liking the most. So I'm going to drag the type of content onto color. And now I can start to see which of those posts were links that are showing up in orange versus photos that have been posted showing up in green, or videos that have been posted showing up in purple. So I can start to get a really good understanding now of what type of content people are engaging with the most and liking the most on Facebook. The other thing I might want to do is bring the message onto the tooltip. So now if I hover over any of these marks, I can get even more understanding as to what that particular post was about. And I can see, for example, that the post that has been liked the most on Tableau Software's Facebook page was back in February 2016, and it was a post about our position in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Interesting. Okay, and then the final view we're going to create using this Facebook connector is to answer the question about when we're posting the most. So I'm going to take the number of posts into the view again, maybe put that on color. And I'm going to break this down by the day of the week. So by weekday. And I'm also going to break it down by hour of the day. And I'm going to change the color palette on this view so we can really emphasize those hours in the week where we're posting the most amount of content. So now I have this beautiful heat map that's showing me these dark orange areas around 5 and 6 p.m. on weekdays, which seem to be the times when we're posting the most content on Facebook. Now, bear in mind that these times, I'm based in the UK, so I need to offset those to the US time in Seattle, which is where our marketing team are based. So actually, that would be the beginning of the day, probably 9 o'clock in the morning is when most of our content is being posted on Facebook. And then finally, I can bring all of that analysis together on a dashboard and make it interactive. So if, for example, I'm interested in understanding more about what's being posted on Monday, I can now click on Monday and see exactly what the patterns and trends look like for just posts which have been posted on, content which has been posted onto our Facebook page on Mondays. So some really interesting insights about our Facebook page. The second example we're going to look at focuses on Twitter data. How can we capture and make sense of the huge number of tweets that are out there that may be relevant to our organization? And here are some questions which you might have of Twitter. When is it the best time to tweet? What tweets are people engaging with and retweeting the most? Where do people live that tweet about us? Perhaps we want to undertake a regional marketing campaign that focus on regions where we know we have a higher population of tweeters. Who is it that's tweeting about us, and which of them have the highest number of followers and therefore the greatest reach? And what devices and platforms are our Twitter community using? Again, perhaps we want to target those platforms with some device-specific marketing campaigns. So similar to the Facebook story, you are able to log into Twitter and you can manually download a CSV file or request an archive with some Twitter data about your account. But that's manual and takes time. And again, you might need to reshape it before you can use the data in Tableau. So what we want to do is to use direct connectivity. And I have also created a Twitter web data connector for Tableau that does exactly that. So let's go ahead and have a look at how this works in practice. So let me jump back into Tableau Desktop. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up the web data connector again. And this time we're going to paste in the link to my Twitter web data connector. And the way that I've designed this connector is that I allow the user to specify the search term that they're interested in obtaining data about. So you could put in anything here. It could be a Twitter handle, it could be a hashtag, it could be a keyword, You can even build up multiple search terms. So, for example, I might say that I'm interested in returning any tweets that match @Tableau or #Tableau. And once you've entered your search term, you click this button here to go off and get that data from the Twitter search API is what I'm using in the background. Again, this would take about 2 minutes or so to run. So I've preloaded the data ahead of time so we don't have to wait. And this is what the data looks like. So once we're in Tableau Desktop and we have connected to our Twitter Web Data Connector, we can now start asking questions of that data. And the first question I have is, when are people tweeting about Tableau? So I'm going to bring in the number of records, and I can see that this particular search has brought back 4,500 tweets. And I might look at this over time on a daily basis. So let's have a look over the last few days. We can see that this data set stretches between the 28th of February to the 8th of March. I actually I thought I'd updated this, but it hasn't updated. So this is a couple of months ago. But I can see that there's a spike here on the 1st of March 2016, where we had 742 tweets that day. And if I take an average line into this analysis, I can see that on average across this period, I had 456 tweets per day about Tableau. Right. So the next thing I want to understand is, where are people based who are tweeting about us? Now, one of the interesting things about Twitter is that it does have a number of different geographical fields that they are able to provide you information on. But the one that I have focused on with my web data connector is a field called the user time zone, because it actually provides a lot more granularity than the time zone, and it can be converted into a country which is suitable for mapping in Tableau. So what we're looking at now, by dragging the user time zone country into our analysis, is a map of the world where we've got a mark or a dot in every country where we have at least one tweet about Tableau. And if I bring the number of records onto size, we can see that actually of these tweets, a good proportion of them, 1,300, are coming from the US. We have 247 in the UK. We seem to have quite a lot coming from people who are based in France as well. I might also want to understand who has the greatest reach. So perhaps we want to get a better insight into not only people who are tweeting about our organization, but how many followers they have. Because if there are people who are engaging with your brand or tweeting about your brand and also have a huge reach of followers, those are the types of people that you might want to work with jointly on marketing campaigns. So to answer this question, we're going to look at comparing the number of tweets against the number of followers that a particular user has. So let's look at the average number of followers, and we're going to break this down by the username. Right. Now there's a clear outlier in the data here, which is the Tableau Viz feed. I think this is the official Tableau Twitter account. So I'm going to exclude that from my analysis. And now I can get a better picture of who those real champions are on Twitter. So here, for example, Big Data Tweet have tweeted 58 times about Tableau, and they have 9,000 followers on their account. There's someone up here who has tweeted 137 times about Tableau and has 194 followers. So these are the types of people that we might want to start engaging with a little bit more. And then finally, I might want to understand more about the platforms and devices that this Twitter community is using. So to answer that question, I'm going to drag the source from my web data connector into the view. And I'm going to break that down by the number of records, right, and sort it. So we can see that by far the most number of tweets are coming from the Twitter web client, which is the browser-based way of logging into Twitter. We also have quite a high number coming from a bot. Lots coming from iPhone. iPhone is significantly beating Android devices within our Twitter community, though. And now I can bring all of that stuff together on a dashboard and make it interactive. So, for example, if I'm interested in knowing about who is tweeting in the US, I can click on the US and just focus on the trends and who's tweeting from the US. Or if I just look at the UK, I can get a good picture of which devices people are using in the UK. Interestingly, iPhone is top in the UK, so I'm getting a different picture of how our Twitter community is engaging with Tableau in those different regions. So that was a good demo of the Twitter Web Data Connector. But questions that I often get asked when I'm demoing this web data connector is, how can we get more information? There are certain limitations of the web data connector, and it's not actually a limitation of Tableau, it's a limitation of the Twitter search API, which it uses. So specifically, the Twitter search API only goes back 6 to 9 days in the past, and it's designed for relevancy rather than completeness. So what that means is it's not guaranteed to capture every single tweet that people might be posting about your search or your organization. And this is where you might want to use a different type of connection. Twitter also have a different type of API called the streaming API. And the streaming API is a low latency kind of live feed of Twitter data that you can consume through their API. So what I have done is write an integration with the Twitter streaming API that streams data directly into Google BigQuery. So just to be clear, this is not using the Tableau web data connector, but this is actually using a Python script that I created to stream data from Twitter directly into Google BigQuery. So I thought I would just demo quickly how this works in practice. So let me go ahead and open up Twitter. In fact, no, let me first of all show you the dashboard, and then we'll open up Twitter in a second. So here's one example of a dashboard that I created using this Twitter streaming API. So this is something that I created and let run during the Tableau customer conference that took place in Las Vegas in October last year. So throughout the conference, I had Twitter data streaming into my Google BigQuery database, and I built a dashboard around that information. And I've got information, for example, here you see a huge spike in Twitter activity during the keynote speech from our developers on stage. Let me do a live demonstration of how this works. So what we're now looking at is a dashboard in Tableau, which is connecting to Google BigQuery. And that Google BigQuery database is storing anything that is coming from Twitter that matches @Tableau or #Tableau. So if I was to tweet about Tableau now, that should show up in my dashboard. So let's do exactly that. If I log into Twitter, right, and let me go ahead and post a tweet. So I'm just going to write live demo of Twitter streaming data with Google BigQuery and @Tableau for Think Data Thursday. So let me go ahead and tweet that. That has now been posted. You can come back to our dashboard, and I'm just going to force Tableau to refresh that dashboard with the latest data. May take a second or so. Okay, and now let's filter this down by username. So if I search for my surname, let's see if that tweet shows up. Yeah, so you can see there's actually 2 tweets from me in this Google BigQuery dataset. And if we drill into those 2 tweets, we'll see exactly what they are. There we go. So the one on the left-hand side here, this was me testing the demonstration this morning. And the one on the right-hand side, this is the one that we just did just now and posted on Twitter. So that's a real-time stream of Twitter data going into Google BigQuery and being visualized in my Tableau dashboard. Just to prove it, there's that tweet at 3 p.m. So that's UTC time, by the way, but it's 3 p.m. on the 19th of May. Okay, so let's have a look at another example. So the third example combines data from 2 different data sources, Google Analytics and Tumblr. The story behind this web data connector that we're going to look at is that I wanted to understand the impact that my blog posts have on web traffic. And these are the types of questions that I had. How many people are visiting my blog? When are they visiting? Where are they coming from? And what effect does new content have on the number of page views and the average time that people are spending on my blog? Let's go ahead and demonstrate how this works in practice in Tableau. So what I'm going to do first of all is to connect to Google Analytics. And if I just show you how this works, I'm going to log in to my connector for Google Analytics. Now, bear in mind that Tableau provides a supported connector for Google Analytics. So this is one of the named connectors that you will see available in Tableau. So this does not require any kind of web data connector or additional development work. This is out of the box functionality. But what I'm doing here is I'm connecting Google Analytics to my blog. So I'm getting site usage metrics about my blog, such as the number of page views and the average amount of time that people are spending on my blog when they log in. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to Tumblr. So just in case there are people who are not familiar with Tumblr, let me show you that. So Tumblr is a open platform you can sign up for and create your own blogs. So it's a very quick and easy way of people creating blogs, designing their blogs, and getting content out there on the web. And I just happen to use Tumblr for my blog, Tableau Junkie. So my blog, Tableau Junkie, is built on Tumblr. So that's the CMS platform that I use. And this is also where you can find all of the connectors that we're looking at today. So what I'm going to do now is in Tableau Desktop, I'm going to connect to my Tumblr web data connector. Oops, sorry, that's the Twitter one. Bear with me one sec. This one here. And the way this works is you simply type in the name of the blog that you want to get your data back for. So in this case, I want to get data for Tableau Junkie. And you click the button to get the blog information. So I've actually done that ahead of time. And now that I'm connected to both my Google Analytics data and my Tumblr data, I can use blending in Tableau to bring those two things together and get a good understanding of what effect my blog posts have on web traffic. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to look first of all at the average amount of time that people spend on my blog. So look at the average time on page. So I can see across my blog, people spend on average 172 seconds, so nearly 3 minutes looking at my blog. And let's have a look at that over time, perhaps on a weekly basis. By week number, right? So you can see when I started my blog, it was around April last year. It looks like there's a slight upwards trend in the number of people, or the average amount of time that people are spending on my blog. But what I want to do is compare that with the specific dates that I posted on my blog. So I'm going to use that second connector from Tumblr using my web data connector. And I'm going to overlay on a dual axis chart the times when, or the weeks I should say, when I posted something on my blog. So the bottom view here is coming from my Tumblr connector, and the top view is coming from the Google Analytics connector. And if we make this into a dual axis chart and synchronize those axes, and let me also bring across information summary of the blog post onto the tooltip, I can now see, for example, that on the 18th of May 2015 is when I posted about my Twitter web data connector that we just looked at. And that seemed to cause a huge increase in the average amount of time that people spent on my blog. But in the subsequent weeks after posting that, it did seem to drop off quite a bit again until July of last year, which is when I posted my Facebook web data connector. So you can see that those two blog posts seem to have had the biggest impact on the amount of time that people have been spending on my blog. And I could do something very similar looking at the total number of views that I've had to my blog and the overall web traffic. So to answer that question, I can build another view, and this time I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but we're going to look at the page views by week and compare that with when I have posted content on my blog. So page views when I blogged. and we're going to blend it on the date and make the view at the bottom circles and bring the summary onto the tooltip, and also make this a dual axis chart and synchronize the axes. So here, for example, I can see that the post that I did in August last year, which was a web data connector for the USGS earthquake API, seemed to cause quite an increase in the number of views on my blog. There's a week here I still can't explain, by the way, which is in September last year. I had a massive spike in my page views. I didn't actually post any content that week. So there's obviously something else which caused that spike, and I haven't quite figured out what that is yet. And I can bring that analysis together into a dashboard to share that insight with my colleagues at a glance if I want to. So that completes the example showing how we can use blending in Tableau to combine data from my Tumblr web data connector with Google Analytics, which is a out-of-the-box connector that Tableau provides. The final example that I have focuses on a slightly different use case to social media. So a question that I sometimes get asked is, how can I source and use weather data to understand the impact that weather has on my business? And when I put this presentation together, I came across what I thought was a very interesting use case of an organization that does exactly that. So Stella, the company who owns Cidre, the cider product, undertook a digital marketing campaign. And what they did is they looked at historical weather data and compared that with their sales metrics for their cider product. And what they discovered is that a 2-degree increase in temperature caused a huge spike in their sales figures. So what they then did was to identify digital billboards as their optimum channel to advertise. And they ran a campaign on a minute-by-minute basis, cost-per-minute basis. And they only activated that campaign when the weather conditions were just right to try and induce purchase intent and get the most number of people buying cider when the weather was right for it. And what they reported is a 65.6 increase in year-over-year sales. And because the ads were only shown at optimum conditions, there was no wasted impressions, which meant that they had cost efficiencies of up to 50%. So I thought this was a really interesting use case of an organization who did some analysis on historical weather data and then used the result of that analysis to make some data-driven decisions and change the way that they were marketing. I've got the source of this article in my slides if anybody wants to look further. Okay, so that leads me on to the question, where can I get that historical weather data? So I did actually have, if you look on my blog, I do have a weather web data connector. It uses Open Weather Maps API. But what I found when I was looking for weather data is that most organizations that provide weather data have a free model where you can get so much data. But typically, if you want to get historical data, that's a paid or a subscription service. I did, however, find one website, which is called Weather Underground, that do allow you to download yearly files for specific locations of weather data. So you can actually download this as a CSV file for particular locations, which gives you the last year's worth of weather data. So this is quite a nice way of getting your hands on some weather data without necessarily having to subscribe to a service. So let me demonstrate what that looks like in practice in Tableau. So let me open up my Tableau workbook. And the first thing I did is I've actually built a data set that has a lot more historical weather data in it. So let me just show you what this data set looks like overall. If I bring in the locations of the weather stations that I have data for, you'll see that I've collected some weather data here for around the world. So I have over 3,000 different locations that I have some weather data for. And the data set that I have goes back 30 years. So I can now do some analysis of the average temperature. So let's have a look at the maximum daily temperature, for example. Let's put that on color. And let's tell Tableau to make sure that it colors things in orange where it's been hotter and things in blue where it's a bit colder. And we might want to understand what the monthly weather patterns look like over the 30-year span of this data set. So I can bring the month of the date onto the pages shelf. And if I hit the play button, Tableau is now going to animate through the months of the year and show me what the average temperature, average daily high looks like in each of those 3,000 locations across the world. So this is quite a nice data set to play with in Tableau. There's some really interesting insights you can have about the hottest and the coldest places and the windiest or the rainiest places in the world if you want to plan your holidays around that. But what I thought would be a really interesting use case is to compare the impact that weather has on the London cycle hire scheme. So here in London, we have a cycle hire scheme where anybody in the public can apply for a key and they can rent bikes by slots of 30 minutes. And our Mayor of London is very heavily promoting that with, it's actually sponsored by Santander. So I thought it'd be really interesting to understand what impact weather has on the number of bikes that are being hired in London. So in order to do that analysis, I first of all needed to filter this weather data set down to just look at London. So what I've done, if I build another view here, is let's have a look at all of my weather stations. I've actually got a set here in Tableau, which is just focusing on the London weather stations. So if I hover over this, it's places like Heathrow Airport and Gatwick Airport just outside London. So I actually have 4 weather stations which we're going to use in our analysis. And what I've also done is I've downloaded some cycle hire data. So this is open data, which is available for you to download in Excel format, and it gives information on how many cycles were hired in London every day. And now what I can do is I can compare those two things in Tableau. So let's first of all have a look at our weather data. And we're just going to focus on those London weather stations that we saw. And I want to know what the maximum daily temperature was on average across London. Right? And I'm going to compare that with the number of bikes that have been hired. But I want to compare that on a daily basis. So what I'm going to do is take the date onto detail, and I'm actually going to use the day of date. That's what I need to do. There we go. In fact, let me pivot that round so it's a little bit easier to see. So what we're seeing here is a scatter plot where on the x-axis, I have the average maximum high for that day. And on the y-axis, I have the number of bikes that were hired on that day. And what we're seeing here is a very strong correlation. Let me put a trend line on this as well. A very strong correlation between the daily temperature, the temperature on that day, and how many bikes were hired. And in fact, I can predict with some pretty good accuracy how many bikes are going to be hired on any given day based on what the weather forecast is, which is really interesting. Now, when I first saw this data, there's a couple of outliers up here on the 6th of August 2015 and the 9th of July 2015, where it seems like there was an abnormal number of cycles being hired in comparison with the temperature, which was only around between 22 and 23 degrees Celsius. And the reason for that was actually that there was an underground tube strike on those dates, which caused a lot more people to hire bikes to get to work, even though maybe the temperature conditions wouldn't have led them to do that under normal circumstances. That then led me to another question, which is, well, why were there more bikes that were hired, 73,000 bikes that were hired on the 9th of July versus 63,000 on the 6th of August? That's quite a difference. So what we can do actually is let's bring in the impact that rain has on this data. So I've got a calculated field here that tells me whether or not it was raining on that day. And if I drop that onto color, sure enough, we can see that on the 6th of August, it was a rainy day. So we had fewer bikes being hired on the 6th of August compared with the 9th of July, which it wasn't raining on. And actually, if you look at these trend lines now, let me bring off the confidence intervals. But if you look at these trend lines, what this is telling us is when it was raining, on average, if you look at the offset of this trend line, it's 9,255. If we look at the offset for when it wasn't raining, it's about 12,500. So what this is telling me is that there are, on average, about 3,300 additional bikes that are hired on days when it is not raining versus when it is raining for a particular given temperature. So if I was in charge of the cycle hire scheme and wanted to do something to increase the usage of London bikes, then I might start to use this analysis to take some data-driven advertising in a similar way that we saw that Stella did with their cider products. So hopefully you've enjoyed this presentation and looking at those 4 different examples of how we can connect to social media, so specifically Facebook and Twitter from Tableau, and get some meaningful insights from those platforms. How we can use blending in Tableau to combine analysis from your website and Google Analytics to understand the correlation between the content that you're posting on your website and the web traffic that's being driven there. And finally, looking at how we can source and analyze weather data to better understand the impact that weather has on your business. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. At this point, I'm going to check the WebEx chat for any questions that have been submitted. So please, at this point, feel free to submit questions on the chat if you've not done so already, and I will go over those in the next few minutes. Yep, great question. So can we automatically refresh data that is coming from the Tableau Web Data Connector? The answer is yes, you need to use Tableau Server to do that. So with Tableau Server, there is functionality that allows you to import your Web Data Connector into Tableau Server and allow it to automatically refresh that Web Data Connector. If you are a Tableau Online customer, you can also automate the refresh using the Tableau Online Sync client. So I do have an example that is very similar on my blog. So if I just open up my blog here, if I scroll down, there is a blog post on, it's called Creating a Live Twitter Feed. So it's doing exactly what I demonstrated, but the example on my blog post, it actually uses Postgres. So it streams data from Twitter into Postgres, but the principle is exactly the same. So I guess the key thing here is that you would need to set up some kind of database to store that Twitter data, whether it be Postgres or Google BigQuery or another database that's going to hold that information, and you can then connect Tableau to that database. I saw one question on the chat, which is, are the measures for the Facebook data, is the logic for the measures for the Facebook connector coded into the web data connector? The answer is yes, absolutely. So with all of the web data connectors, what you do is you actually specify the logic with regards to how the data from that website or from that API maps into Tableau. So with the Facebook connector, I just chose a few measures which I thought would be interesting. So I pull back things like the number of posts, the number of times that post has been liked or shared or commented on. But actually, there is a lot more information which is available through the Facebook API. So if you do have the skill set internally or have people who know JavaScript and understand APIs, they could absolutely extend my web data connector and bring other measures back from Facebook as well. Thank you very much. Just to finish, just to mention, if you do think of questions or have questions after the fact, please feel free to submit them through the Tableau support community. So there is a specific site set up for Think Data Thursday, and there's also a site set up specifically for the web data connector. So please do have a look at those sites and submit any queries through them. I monitor them as well as everybody else in the community. So great place to go. Thank you. Goodbye.